We are speaking with Rabbi Julie Schwartz, ordained in 1986. She became the first woman to serve as an active duty Jewish chaplain in the U.S. Navy. In the 1990s, she established the first clinical pastoral education program at a rabbinical school. She served as a congregational rabbi for 10 years. She's an educator and a mom. Good morning.
Good morning. That's a great way to start the morning.
What did motivate you to become a rabbi?
I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, so I had religious school teachers who were both men and women. There weren't that many female rabbinic students, but they taught as I grew older. And so it never looked strange to me that there were going to be women rabbis. I always just presumed there were. And then I was told a story that when I was very little, like a preschool age, I told the people in my congregation I would be a rabbi. And no one disabused me of that notion. No one said there aren't women rabbis. So I just figured that's what I would do. I really believe that my rabbi when I was growing up, when I was a little child, was Stanley Brav. And he was a joyful person. That's what I remember of him, was just this presence of joy and knowledge. And I think I probably decided whatever he does looks good. He's so happy. And it gives him such pleasure to do this that I probably just figured I better try it as well. And then I did have wonderful role models as I grew older, my rabbis growing up, Don Splansky, and then the students at HUC. I will tell you that when Sally Prezand was ordained in 1972, I thought nothing of it. It was like I was such a normal young adolescent, like I don't care, I can do what I want to. Of course she was a rabbi. Who would stop her? No one was going to stop me either. So it was who I was from an early age.
So does that mean that as you grew up, you learned from your teachers? And did you do separate study readings along the way?
Yeah, I did. I went to a program called International Torah Corps, which is no longer, it no longer exists. It was a program that had begun at Kutz and then moved to a private program up in the White Mountains, where you studied Jewish texts all morning, and then we hiked and played and had fun all afternoon, like a boarding school kind of atmosphere. And then I studied privately with my rabbi after that, learned to translate pretty well by doing the 5 Megillot with him over the course of high school, and Rashi on those texts. And it was a wonderful gift. I not until I was a congregational rabbi and realized how much of a gift that time was, did I understand what he gave to me, the preciousness of that time together. And I also understood, as I got a chance to study with my own students who were interested and committed, that it's a mutual gift.
This is Beshared, meant to be.
Yes. And interestingly, I actually went up to HUC and sat in some graduate school classes, not with the rabbinical students, but with the Christian graduate students, because their text they studied text from English to Hebrew and back and forth. Because I didn't speak Hebrew, I just read it and translated it. So I sat in a Midrash Agadah class with them for most of a semester when I was in high school. And that just seemed normal, like, oh, what a nice thing that they let me here. Who will stop me kind of feeling. I mean, it was like being at home in some ways. I was home in Cincinnati, and I was home doing what I had always imagined I would do. And so things that were difficult, things where, I didn't like a professor or a class, or there was a struggle. I was one of those people who kind of said, so what? Let's move on. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it. I carefully developed an ulcer, though, I never knew why did my stomach hurt all the time? Well, I guess that's where all the tension went. But once I kind of began to understand that we work as a complete organism, that you can't just put it away, you have to work it through, that seemed to go away as well. And that actually honestly happened as I went into the military. The military chaplaincy was a place where I began to understand a lot more about who I was as a whole person. Some of the chaplains I worked with were wonderful about that. They were older brothers to me.
Your choice of going into the military, that was your first foray.
Yeah, yes. I was not, my family was not a military family. My brother was in the Coast Guard Reserve during Vietnam, which I didn't understand much about, but I had no background. I didn't know anything about the Navy. When my ex-husband and I decided to become naval chaplains, it was because we could, because there was a request for a woman to go and break that barrier. And I wanted to see what it would be like. I also really had a powerful experience in Israel, watching the people, Israelis, the connection they had to their country was quite different from what I felt here in the United States. And I wanted to feel that sense of connection and commitment. So I really went and did the summer program, the student summer program, with no expectation this would be what I would go and do full time, but went for the summer, and I realized there was a lot to learn here, and that this would be a way to begin my rabbinate, which would help me grow. And in some ways, I think, and I believe it did, help me grow up. I was young. I was young when I went into HUC. I had finished college in 3 years. So it was clear to me that I hadn't seen that much of the world, and that I needed to kind of grow a perspective of what life was really like. I didn't expect it to be easy or, different, but are so different. At the same time, I think that one of my sad and precious gifts is that I'm able to be clueless. I just go forward. I don't stop and worry about all of the what ifs. I think I do that much better as a mother than I did it for my own life as a professional. But I wanted to do it, and I decided that I would. And then I learned how to run, and I learned how to pass the physical tests. And then I learned how to deal with the struggle to go on active duty, which was not welcomed by the Orthodox movement. They did not want a woman rabbi. They were not ready at that time for a woman rabbi to represent them in the chaplain corps. Mm-hmm. And the Reform movement took up the cause. This was one of those times where I really felt that connection with the movement, with the CCAR in particular, because they backed me up. They got independent authority to endorse me if the Jewish Welfare Board did not. I didn't know about that. That was all behind the scenes. I was, again, kind of this, let's just say, naive young woman that I was going to do this and they would help me. And they did, indeed. There was a fight. There was a rather small battle in which I was just the name. I was not part of it. The meeting when they were supposed to endorse me as a Jewish chaplain took place in New York while I was still in Cincinnati. The Orthodox refused to endorse me. The Reform movement said, well, then we will leave the Jewish Welfare Board and endorse her separately. And so the Orthodox walked out. They said, you've deceived us, and they left the meeting. The Reform movement left the meeting as well. And in the hallway, I love this story as it was told to me, and I've been in that hallway, in that building. In the hallway, they brokered a compromise, which would be that they would come back in, reorganize under a new name, the Jewish Chaplains Council of the Jewish Welfare Board. And each movement would endorse its own, but they would sign it from the entire Jewish Chaplains Council. So it took one signature from one person from the movement to endorse the chaplain with the support of, and that enabled everyone to be equally unhappy, which is always a good compromise.
Memorable way to start your career.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, there were a few headlines in Jewish papers of, Jewish woman breaks up Jewish Welfare Board, which sounds very dramatic and heroic. I sat in Cincinnati and waited for them to approve my papers, and they found a way. Rabbi Barry Green, Alav Hashalom, shepherded that through. And not until I saw the papers in the archives, the American Jewish Archives, did I understand what that meant. that there were people interviewing me and checking me out. I just thought they were taking me to lunch to be kind and welcoming, but there were people saying, yes, she can do this. She'll be the first. It'll be okay. And then I went to the Naval Hospital in Oakland, which I never intended to do. I never intended to not be a congregational rabbi, and I went into the military chaplaincy. And I never intended to be a hospital chaplain. It was not something I thought I would ever want to do. And the Navy, of course, they asked me what I didn't want to do, and I didn't want to be a brig chaplain. That was my bottommost choice. My second bottom choice, lowest choice, was a facility, a hospital facility. And I guess they figured they were giving me one thing I didn't want. You know, they were being kind in one way, so we got the other. They also had made the commitment to place me and my ex-husband together, co-locate us within 50 miles. Our bases would be. So that was the way that they dealt with military couples at the time. They still followed that rule. So then I became a hospital chaplain, and I fell in love with that form of working with people. I had a lot of folks, older chaplains, more seasoned chaplains. They were also older as well. And other people in the hospital, the social workers in the hospital let me go and watch how they did things. And I worked with friends who were in the psychology department and the psychiatry department who kind of took me under their wing and taught me. And I got a remarkable graduate education that way.
That's the best way to get it, don't you think?
Oh, yes, because it was real. I learned, I did what I believe in education is the real key, which is you learn what you need to learn. You can't teach something to someone who hasn't decided there's a need for it. And so as I needed it, they told me what I needed to read or what I needed to watch and learn and practice. And I went, that's how I became a chaplain. And then when I went into CPE later on, when I took courses of clinical pastoral education and then became a supervisor, a teacher of it, that it turned out that was the educational model that they worked from. And I had already lived it, so I did believe in it. We left active duty after 3 years. We're moving back to Cincinnati. And I wanted to learn officially learn how to do what I had been doing. I had this wonderful education, but I didn't quite know that how did I learn how to do this? I wanted more than that. I wanted someone to kind of shadow me through and guide me through. And so I found a class I had taken at HUC, a session with a CPE supervisor who would come and talk to us about this. And I had a dim memory of it. And I looked him up in Cincinnati as soon as I got back here, and he invited me to join his program, kind of just like that. And I did. I took 4 units with him. I took a full year with him and started working on grants at HUC at the same time. So I earned a little bit of a living on the side. I had 2 children by then, and I went through a formal year of training. And by the end of that formal year of training, my training supervisor, Reverend Henry Marksberry, said, you need to become a supervisor. And we need to start a program at HUC, and you can do this. And we did. Again, it was simply that this was the right next thing to do. And found a mentor at HUC. The dean at the time, Ken Ehrlich, had never taken any class of CPE. He had never seen it done, but he seemed to understand from my explanations and from Henry's support that this would be a real gift, a real change in the curriculum at HUC. And so HUC sponsored me through my training. They paid for my training as a certified educator and started a program. And it's still there. The program opened officially in 91. And I had a training supervisor and then became an independent certified educator by 96, I think was that big day. Finished my own training. And now it is a required course on the Cincinnati campus. Everyone takes at least one unit of CPE. I was with the program until 99. Left to finally do what I thought I was going to do, which was be a congregational rabbi. How about that? I was ordained in 86. So by 99, I almost did what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I moved to Atlanta. I had 4 children by then, all 4 of my children who were born to me before I got to Atlanta. And I was for 2 years with a small congregation and with a Jewish hospice. We set up a Jewish hospice in Atlanta, and I had the privilege of being their first chaplain at the same time. So I got to work in that milieu as well. And then I went on to Temple Emmanuel in Atlanta and was their associate and then the senior rabbi there for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I did love it. It was what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And it was exciting and challenging. During the time I was at Emmanuel, I adopted another child, the age of my oldest child. So I had suddenly another teenager, which was, I had then 2 teenagers of the same age, 2 13-year-olds together, and then the rest of my clan. And so all of that happened while I was in Atlanta, and I learned more about myself than I ever thought I could. I actually began to realize that I was following my own advice that I gave to students, which was very good. It was like, oh, that is true. I was teaching them, accurately. That is the way we should be listening to ourselves or framing our experiences. I was divorced during that time and remarried. When I became the senior rabbi, I had been, sitting in the chair next to the senior rabbi for 2 years. I was his associate, and I obviously had been successful enough that they hired me to be the senior. But I suddenly had this kind of sense that I didn't know how to give a sermon. I felt almost blocked. I mean, I was giving sermons, but I didn't feel good at it. And I had a pastoral supervisor, something I urge all of my students to go and find someone, either a therapist or a pastoral supervisor or both, depending on what you're facing and what you need. And my supervisor said to me, when was the last time you saw a woman give a sermon in a synagogue of the size of your congregation, which was an 800 family congregation? And I said, I've never seen a woman rabbi give a sermon in a congregation like this. And he said, well, you don't know what you look like then. You don't have a picture of yourself. You need some help developing that. And so I watched some women preachers in Atlanta in large synagogues, in large churches. There were no women in large synagogues, senior rabbis at the time, but me. So I watched women ministers who preached, and I realized that I could have that voice too. I had to find my voice over again in this role that I thought I would always be so comfortable. That was the place where I didn't have the picture quite yet.
So were you the first woman rabbi to have that large of a congregation in the country?
Not that large in the country. In the Southeast, it was about the time where women were breaking that glass ceiling around then. So 800 families, sometimes the congregation said it 850 families. I was one of the very few in that large of a congregation. And it is true that it's good to have pictures. I mean, I think that's what helped me throughout the military and throughout CPE training, that I saw other people like me and could share with them. And it was a deficit when I went into Atlanta. I had very good friends who were male rabbis, but they didn't have the same voice that I did.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. We all have our own voice.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I love the contact with people. I love teaching. The opportunity to teach people of all ages was really precious.
When you left the congregation, first I imagine they were sad to see you go.
we're sad on both sides. It's the best way to leave a congregation. It's when
Yes, it is.
everyone can say, oh, I wish we could have been together longer, and they didn't feel like I left them for another congregation, so they weren't hurt in that way. I think they felt happy and excited that I was going to go do something and use my experiences there to teach. They felt like they were part of that. They were going back and teaching rabbis as well. In 2009, I was invited back by the college to come back to Cincinnati. The person who had succeeded me in my position had left, and they wanted to make some changes. And they invited me to come back and see if I would, what I could do with the program, how I might be able to grow it. And to come back to Cincinnati was good for me because I kind of came back to a love that I brought then 10 years of rabbinical congregational work to. It broadened my picture and my approach. It also was a chance for my children to live closer to the rest of my family and to have connections with grandparents and aunts and uncles that they had not had. So that was lovely as well. And I have been there since 11. Back to the program, it's still there. It got accredited without me, and I have not lost its accreditation yet. It is good to be back. I really do love this work. I love being with people in formation. I love watching them develop and being able to be a backseat driver and sometimes a front seat driver with them. I like watching them challenge themselves. And I deeply believe in the way that I learned and the way that I help people learn, which is you have to have a need. It has to be something that you see is a live need, that you need to grow this part of yourself. And then that we can. If we go out there, we can do that. I realize now, and even as we're speaking, that my just go do it kind of approach is the way that I ask students to learn as well. That if I have enough faith in to ask you to go do it, you probably should just give it a try. That I won't ask you to try something that my interest is not in helping anyone fail, but it's helping them grow and succeed, which means you have to take risks and try things you've not done before. I never thought of myself as a very brave person or a great risk taker, because I don't do any risky athletics. I'm not walking tight ropes anywhere, but about trying things that you didn't know you could do, and then you do. And that feels it's exciting to do that with students and to continue to do that for myself.
Breaking barriers, but just doing what you wanted to do, you were confronted by many challenges. And to focus for a moment on being a woman early in the process of women rabbis, the whole issue around the military, which was, especially then, because there's still things now that are a problem, and that was rough. And then when you just jump in, I have to say I do that all the time myself. So just do it, and figure out how to get through whatever it is to get through. But easier said than done. And sometimes you say, what was I thinking?
Yes. There is that moment of, did I really think this was it? This was going to be so easy. I'm remembering I had gotten into the chaplain corps. I was a naval chaplain. I knew how to do at least the things new young chaplains are supposed to be able to do. I don't think I ever truly embraced how good it is to be a junior officer, where no one expects that much of you, where you're invited to make as many mistakes as you can to learn. And I do recall, I think one of the hardest experiences I had was not in the Navy per se, but it was with a group of the other Jewish chaplains, was the Jewish Welfare Board annual conference or study kala. And I went for the first time to go be with rabbis who were in all the different services. We were going to have 4 days together to study and for fellowship, and how wonderful that would be. And then I realized I was the first woman to ever go to this program. of course, it didn't occur to me that I was going to be the only woman in the program, and I was, except for the people who were, serving the meals or cleaning the rooms. It was me in the program. And I also didn't realize that what I thought was normal, which would be praying together, was going to be such a challenge. The Orthodox members of the group, many of them were apparently not comfortable with me being at services, even though I sat in the back and thought I was being kind of quiet and unobtrusive. And I was told instead that I needed to sit behind the mechitza because they wanted to pray the real way. They explained to me that they lead services where women and men sit together because they have to, but that's not real. And when they come to this conference, they get to pray the real way without women in their way. And that was really painful to hear that and to realize that, what I thought was all our, chavruta, our great fellowship and our camaraderie, was not exactly what other people were embracing. And I was kind of told by two senior Orthodox officers that they expected me to not come back to services. I happily met them out in the lobby. They wanted to meet me up in my room, and I was smart enough to know that that was not a good idea, that I would meet them in public where they would have to, not, berate me or be rude to me. And then I went to the senior most naval chaplain, who was not Orthodox, and said, what do I do? I did know the chain of command, and I used it. They, together with me, devised a plan where I would sit behind the mechitza, but all the men would sit who were upset for me or who understood that this was not right or fair would sit behind the mechitza with me. And so the next morning at morning services at Shachrit, there was this giant group of people sitting on the women's side of the mechitza, and a small group sitting in the middle, having an Orthodox service. And it was kind of humorous, right? Because first of all, the men started talking immediately. I think they began to realize when you're that far out of the action, it's very hard to stay attentive. So they're chit-chatting and kind of laughing, right? But it was also a powerful gift to me to see that many people say, yeah, we're with you, and this is wrong, and we feel it now too.
What a wonderful way to have that happen. That is a very powerful moment. Brings me to tears, and I wasn't there.
And I have to say, there were Orthodox men sitting on the other side of with us on that side of the mechitza. We saw that there was some hypocrisy here.
Yeah. For the number of men to sit and stand with you at that moment must have been amazing.
It is much more amazing now when I think about it. At the time, it was just what was supposed to happen. Like, there had to be an answer. I had, again, this faith that if I just asked the right people, they would help me, and they did. And we moved on. That it's not always the case, but I was like, well, this is, of course, what's supposed to happen. And I think now about the fact that I've never really discussed that with any of the men who were there with me. Because we just moved on. And I think that it goes to this, it's the same theme again and again. That was what I needed to be doing. Right. I couldn't just sit out services. I had to confront what was in front of me. So I did. I think if I had sat around and thought about it too much, I might have scared myself. So happily, it just happened.
That is who you are. That's how you do things, and it's worked well for you. And even through, and helping you get through those rough places, you have the memories, many of you getting through tough times. So that's a long time now since you've been ordained, and it was beginning at the women's movement. So what do you see have been our gains, progress, and what do you see is still left undone?
I don't feel like we have taken a real accounting of how we as a movement, as a faith group, have changed. I think that there has been this back and forth between nothing's different. This is, just everybody who wants to be a rabbi now can be a rabbi, but nothing's different. And I think that many of us in the beginning forced that. I mean, I supported that. It was, don't treat me differently. I'm a rabbi just like you, which is necessary to get there to be places for everyone. But I also don't think that we've honestly stepped out and said, where are we now that we weren't then? And then we can also say, then, and where aren't we yet? I don't think that we are yet able to. I don't think that women colleagues are treated the same as male colleagues yet. I truly don't. I wish I could say differently. And even when I was treated exactly the same, I was different. I remember when I had my first student pulpit, I was up in north of Toronto as a second year and a third year student. So sent to the middle of nowhere, very cold nowhere, with a lovely group of people, just a wonderful group of a very small new congregation. And I spoke to the president of the congregation for the first time on the phone, long before there were ways to see each other, just a phone call. So just based on my voice, the president of the congregation said to me twice, so is your name Julie or Julius? And I said, no, I'm a woman. My name is Julie. You have it right, and not Julius. There's nothing wrong with that, but it means that there's still a surprise there. There's still how different are we? And then how truly open are we? We continue to hear you can't have an all-female rabbinic staff, right? You can't have a senior rabbi who's a woman, an associate rabbi who's a woman, and a cantor who's a woman on the same staff. There are congregations with that, but it's great risk. Whereas, of course, having a male rabbi, 2 male rabbis and a cantor was never seen as a great risk. It would just be there weren't enough women to find a good one for us. Well, maybe there weren't enough men who fit that other pulpit. So it's still not the same. And we are judged by our hormones still, is she having a baby, or is she all there? And we all know that the typecast sorts of things, angry women or pushy broads and all of that stuff. And I am sure there have people who have said that about my voice, and I don't much care.
That your voice is.
I don't care if you call me an angry broad or a touchy woman. I'm going to keep saying the things that I need to say, but you don't hear men. Men are not characterized that way, and I still see women in school who are scared of those stereotypes, who are not ready yet to speak out. And that's fine. It doesn't all happen at once. I mean, I've been ordained since '86, so I've had some time to figure some things out. But it is still true that women speaking forthrightly is not seen or heard quite the same. Women as they age, I think, are treated very different than men as they age. And I don't know what you do about any of that, but those are all things that are, some of it is just timing. I mean, if you think we're on the 50th anniversary of Rabbi Priesand's ordination, we haven't had that many of us have not been that old for that long. But I was looking through the names of people in classes around me recently, and men are retiring and the women are not retiring, but I think it's because they've not always had full-time jobs. They don't get to retire the same way men get to retire. And I had that as well. I did not work in the same, I didn't work at a paying job in the same way that my first husband worked.
Mhm.
and paid the bills. His salary went up much more quickly than did mine.
Of course, yeah.
Um,
Well, it's happening in the sense of, congregational salaries.
yes,
And that, that says everything too about we're not where we need to be. And it's not healthy for anybody for that to be happening.
no, and it's not fair to rabbis in general,
Exactly.
because no one says, okay, you don't have to work as much if your salary goes down. I've never heard that said. And no rabbi would know how to do it anyway. I think we know how to put up appropriate boundaries better than we ever did.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
But I wouldn't know how to not give what I think is necessary to give to a congregation or to a student. That's
Right.
I mean, we consider this with, the term calling is not so comfortable necessarily, but it is truly a calling.
Mhm.
It's who we are as well as what we do. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, how can you, given why we became rabbis, you don't say no to a member or a situation that is serious and important because the clock has run out.
Yes. Yeah.
Can't do
No,
it.
you have to learn how to rebalance the clock is the great strength, which is to say, I'll be here until you stop needing me, and then I'm taking time off. I know how to take care of myself that way, but no rabbi would say, I can't do it because you're not paying me enough to do that. I would never tell a student that was a good boundary. That's to find a way to help the person and take care of yourself as well. Yeah, I think that's one of the questions that I love the most. Students will say to me, well, how do you balance home life and work life? And I said, there's no balance at all. That you do what you need to be doing at the time. If you're trying to balance it, you're going to go crazy. I don't know how to do that. I know how to, when I had children at home, when I had young kids, I know how to be a mom the best way I know how to be a mom, which means sometimes I find great people to help me and do the things that I'm not good at, or I don't have time to do, or I don't want to do. I'm also allowed to say no to some stuff, even with being a mom. And I know how to do that as a rabbi, and I do it. And then I make sure I've got good people around me. So, but balance, that I think that's a magical word that is not real. I've had such a wonderful time telling stories with you. It's been a great gift to me. Just talk about, fun times or interesting times. Life is not about winning and losing or scoring the highest grade on one's merit. It's about being real and doing the best we can.
Well, you do it well. So thank you, Julie, for all this. This is wonderful.
Yeah,
And
it's been a treat to meet you and to have these conversations.